Okay, so we've just gone live for our latest live stream weekly episode that the London Autism Group Charity is doing to support the autistic and wider autism community. And we are absolutely honored and thrilled to have the amazing Christa Holmans, aka Neurodivergent Rebel. Thank you so much for joining the live stream, Christa. How are you doing? Oh, can't hear you.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
There we go. I muted it when the dogs barked. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored that you invited me and to come back and hang out with you guys again, and hopefully give some useful information today that can be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure you will. Yeah. And James, how are you doing today?
Yeah, very excited for the live stream. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Yeah, it should be a good one. Today we're going to talk through how the COVID-19 crisis has impacted upon the autistic community and the wider community, in particular well-being, quality of life, mental health, that sort of side of things in particular, but anything really. And then perhaps we'll get some ideas about how perhaps we can progress forward, going forwards once this does transition into a new place, hopefully a more positive place, and how we can make sure that we leverage things to try and, make sure all the learning and experiences that have come from this, can be put into good use and make things a better place for the community going forwards. That's the sort of general outline of the sort of general theme for today. Christa, if you don't mind me just asking to begin with, what your sort of general views are in terms of how, or it could be specific as you like, in terms of how the whole crisis, the whole pandemic has impacted upon the well-being of the autistic community and also the wider community, if you wish to talk about that as well. Like, what's your perception of it?
Yeah, sorry, we had a little bit of an internet glitch, but I think correctly, and you were asking kind of about the mental health impact in the community, and what I think is really interesting is how different each individual's experience of what's going on in the world is going to be. We have some people who have said that really maybe this hasn't impacted them that much because they were already they were social distancing before it was cool, so to say. So for some people, they're like, welcome to my world, this is business as usual. But then for others too, who were dependent on certain routines and certain structures in order to go about their day and make sense in the world, some of these support systems or structures may have been removed, and so it's really a wide variety of how people are handling this, even with autistic person to autistic person. Some people are going to be struggling with this more than others, and what I think is really interesting though is what I've noticed is, just because I work a lot in workspaces and with people who aren't necessarily autistic, but then just working with the difference between introverts and extroverted people right now, whereas the people who I've met who are struggling the most a lot of the times are like those really extroverted people. And they're struggling a little bit less than some of the introverted people are in like workplace things, but there's a funny bit of spillover from that, I think, because I kind of liked a bit of the solitude and to kind of be left alone on my own more, and now it's like all of those social people who need a lot more connectivity than I did maybe are reaching out. And so I'm like kind of overwhelmed at the end of some days because there's so many Zoom calls. So sometimes that's hard, and there were just little things. There's just little things in life you take for granted. Like if you are on a restricted kind of a diet, all of a sudden the foods that you like aren't available in the store anymore. And there's no toilet paper, it's like little random things that just were changing all of the world, and everyone's going to handle that differently. And some people have really thrived. Like some people are like, oh my gosh, I love that I can work from home now, and I have more free time, and I have more time to myself, and I have more time with my family, And those things are good things, but not everyone's had a positive change. With our people who are considered essential workers, who are not able to work from home, and they're still going out into the public every day, especially people in the grocery store. Like, those are probably people at really high risk, and a lot of them are out doing these jobs with no hazard pay. So there's a lot of considerations to be made. Or, people who may have had a job and they've been furloughed or they've been laid off and now they're not working, that has a huge impact on people's mental health. Just not knowing, where your next meal is going to come from, or if you're going to be able to make rent or pay your bills. Like, people in those situations are going to be struggling the most.
Yeah, fully agree. And we've also felt pretty much the same sorts of things as you're saying. That I suppose one of the most consistent things that we've seen is just the diversity of impact, as you've described. In that it's really just affected different people in different ways, and it isn't just a sort of straightforward thing of one kind of type of impact, one overall kind of impact. It really does affect people in different ways, and that's something that we've seen. As you said, a lot of people seem to have found perhaps more calm and less, and are feeling less anxiety, because it could be for any kind of reason really, but for many people that experience a lot of perhaps difficult situations outside, for example in schools, that don't perhaps understand very well, or create a lot of anxiety, and so, I mean, speaking personally with my two autistic boys, I feel that they have overall had a reduction in anxiety for sure, and that their well-being as well. It kind of was a bit bumpy at the beginning, but over time, as they found new routines and a new way of being, they've transitioned quite nicely and so forth. But something else that sort of personally had a small impact on us is that we don't put too much pressure on them when it comes to schoolwork and things like that.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of kids, they have a lot of pressure, and that really hurts them, their mental health. And it became quite evident to our children very early that our children, we just had to put the brakes on all that, because it's already anxiety provoking. I think when we talk about the impact that it's had on the community and how difficult it is, sometimes I feel like we overlook how difficult it is for the children, and that it's been a big adjustment for them and the confusion of it all. So we have to really, I think, prioritize their well-being and just put well-being first, really, I think. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like, what you're describing with, your children is like, it's exactly the same for me. It's like, I started out a bit not okay, because it was like, okay, everything, I'd been working for 3 months to get ready to go, start doing certain things and getting on airplanes. And this is what I thought I was going to be like, place to place to place. And all, I thought I knew what life was going to look like. And all of a sudden, I didn't know what tomorrow looked like anymore. And that was really hard for me. And, with the kids, they might not know how to verbalize or express what is really even stressing them out. When I was a kid, sometimes when I was anxious, I didn't have words for any of that. I didn't have vocabulary to talk about mental health issues or any of these things. And so maybe it would just be like, I'm not good. I don't feel good, or I'm not okay. But I couldn't say, and I wouldn't even be like, well, why? It's like, I didn't know why, or I didn't know how to get the feelings out to explain what I needed help with or what was distressing to me. And now as an adult, I've learned to do those things. But like with kids, you almost have to pry a little bit more. And it's like the things they don't say or they don't do have meaning too,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's all communication, isn't it? In some way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. There was someone on one of my Facebook posts recently, and she was talking about, her daughter's stimming. And she was saying, like, when I see my daughter stimming in this certain way, I know she's really, really happy. And this other way that she's stimming, and, that means she's upset. And she is communicating with me. I am watching her, and that stimming is meaningful. And she was one of the ones that saying, I can't imagine telling her not to do that. But we have some parents that do.
Yeah, I know, you're right. It's a terrible situation. But to your point, I just really think that particularly with the whole COVID-19 situation, it's even more important that parents are really sort of in tune and recognize that, communication happens in all sorts of ways, and
Oh,
try to
yeah.
support their children, particularly now when, there could be, a lot of confusion and anxiety and all the transitions and everything else. So it's even more important. I mean, it's always important, isn't it, to be able to be in tune with the communication styles of your children. But in particular now, I'm sure James would could talk about that, because that's something you have a lot of experience with, right, in terms of non-verbal communication.
I think it goes back even before, when I was young, I never heard of anything about autism. It was a big sort of taboo then in the UK. And I think a lot of times when I was younger, I internalized a lot of things and couldn't express them because I didn't have, I identify with what you were saying, Christa, about not having the vocabulary. But I just sort of got on with things, and so I think it's very important for parents to identify, to find ways, identify anxiety and when people are upset, and try and communicate. I mean, I've been lucky with my son. I think I've learned through my own experiences how to communicate with him, and that's really sort of helped me to get through to him. It's almost like we're telepathic. We don't have to talk. We just know. I just know before he does something by his body language that he's going to do something. Yeah.
The weight on prioritizing the importance and value of verbal communication is too strong, in my opinion, socially.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I don't understand why in schooling, growing up, socialization, why there isn't more of an emphasis on recognizing that communication happens in all sorts of ways, so that as we're growing up as people, we just normalize it. We understand that it shouldn't need to be figured out later on in life. But that kind of reflects how society's sort of labeling one form of communication more important than the other. Don't know what you think about that.
Oh, I have lots of thoughts about that. Personally, I feel like I am a much better communicator in writing, and I'm also one of those hyperlexic autistics, so that's probably true. Especially when I have time to really organize and process my thoughts, and that's actually how I process a lot of my emotion, all of that externally, because I'll type, and I can type a lot faster than I can write, because it actually hurts my hand really bad to write by hand, so I type. But I can type and read really, really fast, and I express myself very well that way. And also because, I also have issues with like executive functioning. Sometimes I'll be on one of these live streams with someone, or I'll be on a podcast or be in a phone call, and all of a sudden I'll be going on a tangent, and I'll be going somewhere and be like, I don't remember what I was saying, and that doesn't happen in writing because you get it all down, and it might even come out in an order that doesn't necessarily make sense, but then you can go back and put the thoughts in order so that they make sense to other people. And it's having the time to process, because I need a lot of time to process things too. So it's like sometimes someone will come to me and I'd be like, okay, I really need some time to go think about this, and I'll get back to you. And like I wasn't as willing and open to say, oh, I need that time, or oh, just give me some time to think about this, or let me take a note like this, and let me take a note, and let me put a reminder on my calendar. All these needs that I had but wasn't willing to speak up for a long time. It's all kind of connected to all of that.
It's because we've been raised, you included probably, to sort of be, to sort of believe that response, let me take some time and think about that, is sort of devalued, or is going to come, you're going to get a negative judgment. And that's just wrong, isn't it? That's just not right. What's
completely wrong.
Yeah, I mean, everybody. Why are we valuing, certain ways more than others, if ultimately both of them, or whichever one, gets to a good impactful place? I mean, who cares as to how? Just
I think more people should take some time and think before they act anyway. And this is something I'm learning myself too, because sometimes you get heated and you you don't realize you're about to say something you're going to regret, or that's going to get in trouble, or maybe I need to stop and actually take some time to think this through before I act. And so like being able to do that in those situations, especially like in business and work situations, it's like, well, let me get back to you, you know, and let me take some time on that, or I don't know right now, but I'll get back to you. Like it's evolving into other areas in my life too, like once I've learned that kind of a boundary, because now it's like I'm getting really frustrated with this, and it's not something I should be frustrated with. I'm going to go take a break from this, and I will come back to it when I have a clear head. But I didn't have that skill even maybe 5 years ago. I probably didn't have that skill. You know, these are like new skills that I'm always growing on and building, and they get easier the more you use them. It's like a brain muscle, right? Instead of an arm muscle, you're flexing and training your brain muscles so that these constructive habits are easier for you, so you know you can have a bit of a happier life and not go spiraling when things get bad.
Yeah, definitely agree. So going back to COVID, I was just wondering what your thoughts are as to, you know, perhaps how do you think the United States, because in the UK we have very clear opinions. It's pretty clear, I'll tell you, in the UK, our government has not really thought about autism or disability or just sort of diverse populations at all when it comes to, you know, managing the crisis, you know, and not at all. It's all been very universal blanket messaging, policies, and it's just sort of left a lot of communities behind. And in fact, you know, in the UK, we've got a bit of a crisis with mortality rates from COVID-19 among, for example, people with learning disabilities who reside in care homes. I mean, care home population has been really sort of treated very badly in the UK and sort of left behind. So it's just sort of one example, really. And they've made no real effort to sort of talk to, you know, autistic people or community people with sort of the community's trust, or, you know, that have a gatekeepers to the community. It's just all been very top down, not participatory, you know. And, you know, I think a lot of problems we've had as a result have been worse than they could have been. Is that similar sort of experience where you are? You're in Texas, aren't you? Or has it been better than that? What's your assessment?
I think there are some things that are probably better in certain ways. Like, for example, I think maybe it's just because our laws are set up to where the states are kind of allowed to pass their individual laws on certain things. And so the management has been kind of very regional. Like Texas state government had different rules from the states next to it. New York had different rules. California had different rules. And they were all allowed to kind of manage based on the amount of outbreak in their given state. But then within that, we had local city government and municipalities who shut down more and took things more seriously. I'm near Austin, Texas, and so they shut down and took things very seriously here, really pretty quickly and pretty early. I was actually traveling when it happened and the lockdown went into effect, and I came back to Austin, and you know, it was a totally different, like almost like a post-apocalyptic world, you know, because when I was out traveling, it was business as usual, because region by region they did it differently. And in Austin, I think they did pretty well, but you know, even the state of Texas now, they're trying to open up statewide, and the governor was trying to you know, I think get Austin to be a little bit more quickly opening up than it was, but that's kind of where a lot of the cases are here in the state. There are a lot of guidelines and rules into all of the opening up, but you know, my big concern now is, you know, people, I've seen people out in public, they're supposed to be doing all of these things and supposed to be reopened with social distancing and limited capacities. But I've seen people on the beaches, you know, intermingling, and they're, you know, when David and I go out in RV, we RV because we like to social distance. So we were already going out and RVing and being in the middle of nature away from people. So we're on our own bubble. We're not getting into crowds or, getting near any of those people. We're like 20 feet, not 6 feet, stay over there. You know, we're not taking any chances going in that, but people are really not being careful. So it's kind of scary that they're opening up, because it's like, I feel like, things might get worse, but, you can't really know, because like there's like precautions. They're saying people are supposed to, you can get to go retail and to go foods and all these things, but they're letting people back into restaurants. And I know populations that specifically haven't been served well in the United States would be like, I've heard there's things in nursing homes, for elderly care, which that's a really big concern as well. And then the prison systems, there was a lot of outrage with the people not protecting people in the prison system, and they're like sitting ducks in there. So that's really scary. And of course, that's what I hate to say it's what governments do, but it's like what a lot of governments do is they pick people that they decide, we can't worry about those people right now. And it's like what everybody, it's like they're not they're not picking up on it that it's not okay.
They're deprioritized.
These people are not okay. Like to say these people aren't worthwhile. That's not okay. Anytime somebody does that.
That's exactly what we felt over here as well. It hasn't been very. I mean, if I'd like to think that if I was in charge or if you were in charge, we would have had more sense to go and sort of talk to people in communities that understand the sort of particular needs and the particular ways of effectively supporting each community. I mean, so for example, in the UK, another example is that there's been a particularly high rate of cases and mortality among the ethnic minority populations, and obviously big part of that is because of poverty and therefore increased likelihood of underlying health conditions, because of course poverty and social deprivation sort of correlate with poorer health and therefore more at risk. But the thing is, there's been no sort of attempt to tailor messaging to those communities. I mean, it's when you have a product and you want to sort of advertise that product and you want to sell it, you don't just treat all your audiences the same way, right? You would advertise at a certain time in a certain place in a certain TV channel, radio station. All we get over here is just the basic national, well, it's not basic, but the national kind of TV channels, which is obviously good, but there's no real emphasis in going into the communities, and that's been a problem for sure in the UK. And I guess that kind of reflects just the wider problem with the way that governments think, in that they think in this sort of very broad way, and it's not maybe as sophisticated. Things aren't as sort of nuanced and sophisticated as they need to be when it comes to policy development and so forth.
I don't know if I'd want that job, though, honestly. It's a really big responsibility either way, and it's scary. And no matter what you do, we're going to have probably a catastrophic loss of life, and we've already had catastrophic loss of life, and we may have more to come.
Do you think there will be a second wave, or what's your feeling about that?
I mean, watching everybody on the beach not being cautious is concerning. It's as we're opening back up, we've got those people that aren't going to approach things with caution, and that those people that kind of weren't being careful probably the whole time to begin with.
So I suppose the other thing about all this that I wanted to sort of get your insight into was just how we can leverage things moving forwards. So we were speaking to Kieran Rose, for example, a few weeks ago on the live stream, and he was making some really sort of pertinent, important points as to the fact that, for example, now people know what, living with a lot of anxiety and unpredictability is like. People now know what it's like to be socially isolated and feeling loneliness when they might not have had it before. So for example, as you were saying, extroverts, they may be struggling a little bit more because they're so used to going out, enjoying social contact and so forth, and so they're really feeling the isolation a lot more than they would have normally, but at the same time they're perhaps getting a dose of what many autistic people and others in the community experience just, you know, normally. So Kieran was sort of saying, you know, now everybody's got you know, a feel of it, and you know, it's important to sort of leverage that to progress things moving forward, so that post COVID-19, you know, we don't just go into the same old world that we were before, where all that exclusion, loneliness, discrimination. Of course, it's still going to be there, because, you know, it's not quick. There's no quick fix, and we've got a long way to go. But there's got to be some positive ways to leverage what's happened to try and move things forwards for the community. Don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Oh, I hope so. I have a lot of thoughts, because that's kind of how I'm coping and dealing with it right now. Is looking on the bright side and trying to look for what positive, or what can we learn for this? What can possibly happen that we can take away from this really horrible, really crummy situation, you know? And so some certain things I'm looking at right now that give me a little bit of hope in this dark time is, number one, you know, since I've been working with employers and workspaces and trying to make them more inclusive for autistic people, for a lot of us, myself included, that includes being able to work remote and have that flexible work schedule and being able to do that. Now, because of COVID-19, businesses that were non-essential had to either go remote or shut down. And so I was always pushing for this with employers and organizations, but they would always have pushback. A lot, well, not always, but a lot of them will have pushback, because they're like, how can we trust our employees? They're just going to be slacking off in their PJs eating Netflix all day. You know, they were afraid of all of the myths about working from home, and now they've had to confront it and face it. And, like, you know, we've even had local state governments here, and, you know, city government, they're going to be so resistant to working remotely, you would think. And, you know, there was a news article that they put out that one of the, you know, they're now going to keep a large percentage of their staff remote, because they know they're more efficient working at home. Their productivity has spiked. More and more companies, you know, like big companies, have been announcing online that they're going to keep percentages of their workforce remote, or let people work remote more, because they're learning it is better. And then a flexible work schedule, which I've been pushing for, is becoming favorable now, because here in America, and it sounds like over there in the UK too, a lot of schools have been shut down, and parents are now working while, let's face it, if you have a kid at home, you can't just put a 5-year-old or an elementary school kid on a Zoom meeting and walk off and leave them there most of the time. You're teaching your kid. You're now not just, you're a parent, but you're also now a teacher. Surprise. And you have work to do. So it's like allowing, like, those parents, if they are, you know, they've got a kid at home and they're alternating between with, you know, their spouse or their significant other, they're alternating between caring for a kid. They can wake up early in the morning, work before their kid's up, so that they can spend time with their family during the day, and they can alternate days, and they can work around their schedule. So having this flexible scheduling, yes, and working remote, it really benefits autistic people and people with disabilities, but it also really can benefit everybody, and parents and families. And I think we're starting to see a bit of that now, as how beneficial it really can be. And I really hope, I'm going to be disappointed if workspaces go back and don't learn anything from this. I'm hoping we learn something from that and we change the way we work. And, you know, people have been a lot more compassionate right now in the workplace lately, for people to be a bit more human, and everyone, there's a little bit less expectation, I think, for people to be as perfect, which is great. You know, there's just so many reasons that's a weight off everyone's shoulders.
Yeah, fully agree. Yeah, definitely flexible working, remote. There was a lot of sort of stigma towards that before, wasn't there? You know, in that it sort of wasn't sort of recognized as proper working often in the same way. You know, I remember when I used to go to work, you know, I'm thinking back now, before, you know, in a couple of jobs ago, about 10 years ago or something like that, when I used to go to this office every day, and the idea of having any time to work from home was just totally out of the window. You know, you still have to beg for it. And I really enjoyed working from home. You know, I found to be honest with you, I'm much more productive working from home.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I fully agree. I hope things change. And also to your point, your other point, which I think is really good, in that I just hope going forwards people continue to realize that, you know, productivity is not as important as well-being. You know, at the moment we're all focused on, okay, safety and well-being are number one. You know, there's a lot more, I think there's generally a lot more
But
focus
those come
on,
first. They have to come first, because you can't be productive if you don't have a sense of safety and well-being.
Yeah, they have to come first. Fully agree. But I feel like in the past, it's hard to say, but I always got the sense that the economy and productivity came first. So I hope, because now the focus is on public health and well-being, you know, and safety. So I hope going forwards, beyond COVID-19, that's always going to remain the priority. So, you know, particularly for vulnerable communities as well, you know. So, yeah. I mean, the other one I was thinking of was homeschooling, because again, that was something I know our friend Emma Dalmain is a big advocate of homeschooling.
Yeah.
And she used to tell us quite often that it's, and we felt it as well, it was quite stigmatized before, you know, that wasn't viewed as real schooling, you know. It was sort of, you know, there was a real big pushback on it, you know, by the authorities. It's not illegal, but you get really sort of negatively labeled, let's say. But now it's obvious that homeschooling can work, you know, and we're also accepting it, and it shouldn't take a circumstance like this to just switch from, you know, stigma to acceptance. It should have just been acceptance all the way through, really.
Oh yeah, telehealth is very similar. You know, I have an app, and you can talk to your doctor on your phone. But those things were thought of as, by even a lot of professionals, like, oh, your doctor does telehealth. Maybe they might not refer you to that doctor because they don't feel confident in that, or so now, like, a lot of people, especially like with mental health, like access to mental health has improved, I think, because especially if you have anxiety, you're not going to want to leave the house, especially if it's like social anxiety or anything. You're not going to want to leave the house to go somewhere new to talk to a professional. Now you can turn on a video call and talk to someone and get help with your mental health from home. And that's more widely available and accepted now. It's not like, oh, you got one of those internet therapists, which that was a stigmatized thing too.
Yeah,
so hopefully we'll see, like, in Texas, we've got rural areas where, they've got only a few hundred people living in a town, or only 1,000 people in this town. In those towns, you can't tell me they probably might have someone, but a lot of those rural areas probably have no mental health access. Now, at least if they have internet, and some of them probably don't even have internet, they can have, access to services that might not have been available before this. So it's some of those other, like, trying to look for some good in all of this garbage.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, it could be that this was, in a strange way, of course, a very, tragic year in many circumstances, but it could be a year that, helped progress us moving forwards, and at the same time. But that's only going to be the case if we really leverage.
It's up to us.
Sorry,
it's up to us.
It's
up to us to make something out of it. To learn something from it. And it's cheesy. They say, oh, if you don't learn from your history, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, we're really going to see with this one, right? Like, what are we actually going to learn from this?
Yeah. And I hate to be negative, but it is likely that there will be another pandemic at some point in the future. We need to be better prepared and learn to, be better prepared for the next time, for sure. James, did you want to ask any specific questions?
Maybe just pick up on what you were both saying. Both neurotypicals and autistics have been through this pandemic together, and obviously both the populations have had to work together. We've learned from each other, and hopefully those lessons can be carried forward in a positive way, and something positive can come out of it at the end. I think that's what we've heard speaking to a lot of people in these live streams, that we have to make something positive, come out of it. So, and make sure the professionals and the people that we're working with remember that the sort of cooperation that has been and the successes that they've been, and that the positive stuff isn't left behind and isn't forgotten.
Yeah, fully agree. I think though we can't just sort of hope for it. I think we're going to have to, as a community. I think we're going to have to network up and lobby, do some lobbying, perhaps group up in some way. We have to sort of figure that out, perhaps.
Well, there have been quite a lot of case studies now where we know certain things that we didn't know now work, like you're saying about home education,
telehealth,
about Zoom calls, using that in the workplace and working from home. It's all, we know that it's all doable. We've got the evidence now, so it's up to people to lobby for what they need, the support that they need, and things like that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Rapid change, very sudden change, and then it'll change things forever. So I was kind of joking with someone, and I was saying, I feel like George Clooney in that movie where he was grounded, and now he's told, now you do all of your work through the computer. You don't hop on a plane and travel anymore. And it's like, that really actually might be the future. Like, even after this, I think of a year of giving presentations through Zoom, and once people realize, like, oh, it's a lot more affordable to have a conference on the internet and not fly in a bunch of speakers. But I love flying in, but airfare in itself is such a big expense. Or, just how we do business, if people are commuting to work, they are, spending an hour or two each way in traffic sometimes. And that's, hours of your life you'll never get back. I commuted 10 years from, at least an hour each way, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of hours. That really adds up, when we could just, I work a lot more hours now too. It's like, I log on, my computer's just right there. I get my coffee and I sit down at my laptop and I work. I log on earlier. I work later sometimes too, because I'm not losing that time in traffic, and we're not polluting the earth with our, the traffic if we're not commuting. So, there's hidden things that might be okay if we do learn those lessons that we're all talking about.
The environment is actually another really good point that you're making. In that, it's obvious that pollution levels have gone down, environment's benefited, and again, I think going forwards, hopefully we can, recognize that it's actually good for the environment as well. Remote working, less travel. We've got to sort of recognize and value that, and not go back to the old ways of just not caring so much.
Yeah.
But the other thing I just wanted to say was you were saying about commute times. Now, a lot of people, as you say, aren't commuting now, and they're working from home and whatnot, and they're saving much more time. And it's great if you're happier and you want to do more work. That's great. You're more productive. But the other thing you could do is, like, utilize those hours, those saved hours, to put towards something that benefits your mental health or your general well-being. Do you know what I mean? So if I'm spending an hour driving somewhere and I'm not anymore, I can go for a walk for 35 minutes and get some exercise in, or do something. So it frees up a lot more opportunity for just putting your well-being first.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of where I feel like in the mornings, like when I'm fresh and ready to go, I'm almost eager to jump on my computer and start working, because I like what I do. When you love what you do, that's another secret, is loving your job and loving what you do and loving the work you're doing. You're eager to go to it. But like, when I get my evenings back. Because before it would be like I would come home from work and maybe it would be a 2-hour commute and I'm tired and I crash out and I don't want to do anything. And now it's like, I start work earlier and I actually log off earlier most of the time so that I have a little of that time back. And then the other thing is, you get the time back where as a whole. So I have that flexible schedule to where some days I might work longer days, I should say, and other days I might work a half day or I might work less hours. So that's something I should say too, is like, we can be productive, but I am actually making a very conscious effort, especially right now, because, we're living through a pandemic and so many other big events in the world that are really taxing and hard, that, I'm taking a lot more downtime. I have a lot more chunks of time where I'm in the day going to like take 15 minutes and go for a walk, or I'm going to stop and go sit in another part of the house and have a cup of tea. And like those things are calendared now. Like I'm making a lot more conscious effort, though, even though, I have been a bit more productive just because I found some extra time back in my day, and also because I have more energy. But that making that time and taking that time to like have reflective time and quiet time and time to slow down the brain, because I'm one of those people where I get to where I'm going a million miles a minute, I'm going really fast, or this is probably my worst, most toxic habit is, if I am not wanting to deal with emotions or something, I will bury myself in my work and make myself overly busy so I don't have to think about my feelings. But then, the feelings are still going to be there later. So that's not necessarily a productive way to deal with your emotions. But, it's like we've all got our ways that we cope. So it's like forcing myself to realize that is what I do and say, okay, well, Friday is my short work day, or Friday, maybe I only have 4 appointments and I only work 4 hours. And, the weekends, I'm very strict, like, you're my last appointment of the day. And when we're done, I'm going to put my laptop away and it goes in a drawer and I don't pull it back out until Monday. And it's family time and I'm going to spend time with David and we're going to not be working. I might have my phone and check in every now and then because sometimes social media is an enjoyable and can be a relaxing thing, but it's very like, just pop in real quick. I have to, that downtime, and making that rule and making that really clear boundary is like, this is work time, this is downtime. And it's like a lot of autistic people, I think, we have been encouraged, a lot of us, to pace ourselves with neurotypicals. And we let them set the pace and we burn ourselves out because, stretch is really different. Like things that are difficult for them are not difficult for us, and things that are easy for them are difficult for us. And so they are we're stretching to do activities. That's a lot of stretch, a lot of effort for us to do something that they're taking for granted. And then if we're pacing ourselves with them, we're pushing ourselves too hard and we're going to burn out and we're going to do a really bad disservice to our mental health. A lot of them, they may say, oh, I unwind by going out and going into a loud place and hanging out and socializing, and that relaxes me. And some autistic people who are more extroverted may feel similar, but with me, that is the opposite of how I unwind. And for a lot of years, I was not being necessarily very true to myself. And I would be like, well, this is how you unwind. This is what you're supposed to do to unwind. I would go to parties and go to happy hours and go to networking things. And, those are where they have alcohol and things, and realize, I don't even like alcohol that much, but usually I was drinking because I was uncomfortable. I didn't like the situation. And so it was like something to numb the senses and relax myself, because I wasn't being true to myself. I shouldn't have been there in the first place. I was just doing what I thought you're supposed to do to unwind, because I didn't know there was another way.
Yeah, it makes sense. Totally makes sense. I think a lot of people probably identify with that, in that they, just go along with what society sort of expects and values. We've got to find what works for us so that we don't feel confused and we get to that place of happiness and calmness quicker. But it's a tricky one if we're sort of growing up with all these messages and expectations. I think it just again emphasizes the importance that we need society. We need to be teaching our children going forwards that people different. There's no sort of better way of necessarily doing things or thinking in certain ways. That we've got to just sort of really embrace diversity and in all its forms, so that you're not having to sort of figure things out and struggle through it, which it sounds like you went through. And I sort of identify a little bit with what you're saying as well, too. Yeah.
I think another area that autistic people struggle is just going out to work. And if you're in a big city that's very busy, commuting, going on several buses or trains, crowded spaces, and trying to find your way, maybe you're standing in the rain, for part of it, waiting for the bus. And then you've got this stress of, I'm going to be late for work, and you might go in on your first job or something and melt down, and lose your job or something, so we've got to sort of embrace these alternative ways of working now. And, it would actually save a lot of time, just saving traveling into work, maybe 1 or 2 hours. You could be working that time instead, and finish earlier, probably get the work done quicker and be finished earlier and do something else productive for your mental health after that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of autistic people don't drive either. I am not the best driver, I will admit. I can do okay, and in the small town I'm from and on some backcountry roads, I am terrified of driving the RV, and I am actually I get so much anxiety driving my car in the big city. And one of my jobs, I had to commute into places I'd never been very frequently in the big city. And there's all of these one-way roads, and you can drive the wrong way down a runway, and they got to find a parking, and it was
stressful.
I was always getting lost and always going the wrong way, and it's like I would have to leave to get to anything so early. Like I'd have to leave, 2 hours early to get somewhere because I've never been there, and I know I'm going to get lost, and it's like otherwise I'm going to be so anxious. That is probably one of, I'm learning my triggers too since I've been diagnosed autistic and learned I had anxiety and all these things, but being late is really a huge trigger for me, knowing I'm going to be late, especially work. So I don't even play. I'm like, okay, we're going to leave. I'm going to give myself 2 hours to get there. Okay, fine. And I'll go wait, in my car for 20 minutes, or I'll go for a walk for 20 minutes. I'll familiarize myself with the venue or something, I'd rather be early than late and scrambling any day.
Yeah. When I used to have nightmares, that's the only thing I used to have nightmares about.
Yes.
Driving, always going the wrong way, driving, and anxiety of learning to drive took me a long time. It took me for about, I think, 5 years. But I've been driving now for 25 years. It's taken me this long to relax about it. And even now, if I went somewhere and I didn't have a sat nav or something to tell me where to go, I'd get anxious going somewhere new.
I need the nav.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's interesting though about the lateness thing? What do you think that is? Because a lot of people, I think, feel the same as that. The idea of being late is sort of terrifying. Why do you think that is?
It's hard to say because, for one, it could be coming from me because, I am I have my calendar and it's my visual schedule and I stick to it. And I know if I stick to my visual schedule and I don't get off track, my life will make sense. My day will be calm and I'll get everything done. And so there's that part. But then the other part of it is, how much of that is what society's put into me about being afraid of being late. I don't know where that line is, how much of it's me, because, other things, I've dealt with mental health would be definitely anxiety, a lot of perfectionism. I have very obsessive tendencies, and I say that with the stigma attached because it can be bad. There's good obsessions and there's very bad obsessions, and thinking over things that you don't want to be thinking about or things that cause you stress are definitely really unpleasant. And so I have a lot of that rumination and that anxiety and that perfectionism, and so much of my life is me talking myself down from that and saying, okay, let it go. It's not as bad as your brain's telling you it is.
Is that how you get out of it? You sort of talk yourself out of it? Do you sort of self-talk or?
Yeah, not out loud as much anymore because people look at you funny when you walk around talking to yourself. But I do, well, actually, home alone in my house, I talk to myself a lot. And when David's home, I'm talking to myself a lot. And but like, you know, out in public, you become a lot more self-conscious. Like you become a different human sometimes out in public because you're so self-conscious. My body doesn't even move as freely when I'm out in public as it does when I'm in the house, which is kind of interesting. It's not as bad as it used to be, I think, before I was diagnosed, but there's always these certain situations where you just feel like I don't feel safe right now, or you're with people you don't feel safe around, and then it's like I just want to blend in and be invisible, you know.
Yeah, makes sense. I do think part of it is likely to be society's push for, you know, being not late. You know, it's all, again, that's another massively stigmatized thing, isn't it? You know, you should never be late. It's like if you're a minute late to a job interview, your chances are shot down. You know what I mean? But that's just also stupid. You know what I mean?
Years of insomnia from being afraid I was going to oversleep and miss my alarm. I would wake up in the middle of the night in a panic because like I would have these nightmares about being late for work, and like I would wake up like every 2 hours or every 3 hours, or if I had something important the next day to get, like I knew it was like, oh, I can't oversleep, you know, even if it's not work, if it's something important, I was like, I can't be late, like, or if it's a flight or something, it's like I still can't sleep before a flight in the early morning. You know, it's like I'm too worried about being late, and that's terrible because I hate it. And so like my only, because that's an anxiety I haven't been able to get rid of. I haven't been able to just tell myself it's okay to be late, so I just go, just be early. Just be early. That's my solution. It's like I don't want to fight it.
That's probably why you may have struggled to let go of it, because it's an easy solution, isn't it? You know, just be early, you know, and that works. So, you know, but it's a shame that it has, you know, if there was any kind of social responsibility, you know, from society, that's a shame, isn't it? Because that's preventable. If we just didn't, you know, value being on time as much as we did, and stigmatize being late as much as we do, then that might not have played such a, you know, a big part in your life in terms of anxiety. You know, I mean, to some degree,
stuff happens. Yes, I'm sure, you know, because stuff happens, and that, you know, that's the thing is that when we're allowed to be more open and more human with things, you know, I think it's more beneficial for everything, you know, because you go first and you lead by example, and then other people say, oh wow, they were really honest and they were very vulnerable and they were, you know, they were real with me, and that's like setting a precedent and setting an example and encouraging others around you to be able to do the same. And, you know, just as an autistic person, and as, you know, anyone who is maybe like lived in a time where they were maybe in a closet or not living their best life or living out there, it is just so different to not have that burden to feel like you have to hide and be someone you're not. And, you know, it's and a lot of autistic people, I think, still feel that way for a lot of different reasons, but it's really hard on your mental health. And, you know, and, you know, I say different reasons, it's like a lot of it's safety. You know, whenever usually I feel like I'm hiding, it's like I don't feel safe. And I'm someone who's, you know, people are always surprised. They meet me in person, they're like, you're tiny, because I'm like 5'2", you know, and like a person of small stature who's not very threatening. And I said, I feel like I have to hide. But, you know, say someone who's having a meltdown or some other thing in public, where it's like, they might try to come comfort me maybe, you know, whereas other people, that like, say with a police encounter or something, it could be very dangerous. So, you know, there's so many things to unpack with that issue.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Christa, for your time. I just want to say, you know, you really inspire me and James, and you know, thank you for everything you do. Really an extraordinary. I mean, I don't want to sound, you know, like I'm sort of judging you or anything, but I do feel that you are an exceptional, you know, advocate. We're lucky to have you, and thanks so much for everything you do, and just I think you do immeasurable positive impact. You know what I mean? It's really extraordinary. So thanks so much for everything that you do. take care
I'm
of
just
yourself.
doing my best. I'm just doing my
Well,
best.
it's working.
That's all any of us can do is just, find what you're good at and use that to be something you can do something good in the world with. And, just do your best. Like, work, with good intentions every time, and, try to just do good, and go out there and do it. Because that looks different from every person. Some people, it may be more, online and behind the scenes work. Maybe you're talking to people offline and, nobody knows what you're doing because it's not on social media. I'm out here and I'm very public. And that's, a choice and a privilege that I've made, as my blog has blown up really quickly. But there are so many people out in our community who maybe don't even have a social media following, who are doing really great things that we don't even know about. So I just want to say that too, is like, I appreciate you, but we've got a lot of great people out there in the world doing things that, they're invisible.
We have a late question that's come in.
Okay.
I hope you don't mind if we take it, because I'd feel bad if we overlooked it. From
Please
Sakina.
take the question.
I have a 5-year-old and wondering, how did your parents support best? So I'm guessing the question is just advice as to how, or your own experiences on how parents can best support a 5-year-old.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to probably understand is that, your kids have a very different perspective on things that you might not understand. So sometimes, they may be doing something and you're like, I don't understand why they do this, but there's most likely probably a very logical reason in your child's head that they're doing something. And, if they can't share with you why that is, meet them with curiosity instead of trying to squash something because you don't understand it and be like, don't do that, that's weird, or don't do that, that's not appropriate. Really empower your child to be themselves and teach them that, they're not a broken person. They're an autistic person. They're a different kind of person than some other people, but that doesn't make them wrong. That doesn't make them defective. And don't let yourself treat your child like they are defective or like they are broken. Don't talk about your child if they're not as if they're not in the room, as if they can't hear you. Even if your child doesn't speak using their mouths in a traditional way, that doesn't mean they can't understand everything you're saying. So don't take that for granted. And even if you think your child is too young to understand what you're saying, don't underestimate your children. And, that's a big part of it too, is don't underestimate your child. Your child is 5. And so at 5 years old, we have no idea what that child is going to look like in 10, 15, 20, 30 years. We don't know what that child will look like as an adult. So don't put your child in a box, and don't ever say, oh, my child will never do this, my child will never do that. Help your child focus on the things that they love to do, the things that they're good at, and the things that bring them joy, because that's really what you're going to do to help them be a happy, successful adult or autistic person, from childhood all the way up to adulthood, who grows and actually is confident in themselves instead of feeling like maybe they don't have the right to take up space. Unfortunately, I've met a lot of autistic people that feel they don't have the right to take up space in the world.
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much. I can't add to that. That's perfect. Yeah.
Good question. Right in there at the last minute.
Yeah, really good question. Yeah. I think if all parents, did what you're suggesting, if all parents did what you were suggesting, the sort of general levels of mental health would just go up so much. We'd have so much fewer problems than we do. So it's such important advice. Fully agree. Yeah.
Oh yeah, guys, thank you so much for having these important conversations and bringing me into them.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks. The honor and thanks is all ours, really. So, as I said, do take care of yourself. Let us know if you ever need anything. If you do ever want to come to the UK in the future or whatever, we'll sort help you out as much as we can, and it'd be really, really great to meet you sometime and over here, or if when I come to the States next, maybe we'll have to connect.
the States are big, but yeah, I definitely, the UK is on my bucket list. Eventually, I'm gonna make it over there somehow.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen. I just don't know when. I'm putting that out in the universe as much as I can to put that out there. But someday maybe we'll sit in person, face to face. That'd be great.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. On that note,
somebody needs me.
All right, we'll let you get on, James. Thank you so much. Take care, Christa.
Bye. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
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 Bye.